In the early years of the world, countless bizarre creatures fell to Earth, turning it into a battlefield of myriad races. In the beginning, humans also had awakened ones with special abilities, but their numbers were very few. The power of humanity was swept away by the wind, but they reluctantly built 10 defensive lines against the invasion using firearms and nuclear weapons. Within 10 years, 2 of humanity's defensive lines had collapsed, making the situation increasingly serious. In this difficulty, they had to desperately resist the attack. According to statistics, since humanity began warring with demon races, the human alliance alone had lost tens of thousands of people in battle. Today, with the depletion of firearms and the increasing number of people with special abilities, countries have begun to shift to armies of awakened ones to fight. Humans must continue to expand the size of their armies and participate in the war to protect this place. And so, in 15 years of the myriad races era, the largest military mobilization in history has begun. At a border area, an official on the memorial platform commemorated the martyrs who had sacrificed themselves on the front lines. He was the mayor of this place. His moving speech made many people cry. They were determined to protect the country by enlisting. These people said they wanted to join the army, wanted to go to the front lines to destroy the enemy, but among them was one exception. He was Nanzang, whose special ability had not yet awakened. When the staff asked if he would choose to join the army, he replied no. He wanted to stay behind and become a logistics soldier. The people around were buzzing about this decision because those who stayed behind for logistics were all elderly and women. They felt embarrassed because he was a student from their school. The registration staff asked him if he had good health, excellent achievements, and whether he was choosing to retreat when the homeland was in danger. Had he forgotten the humiliation of being slaughtered by the myriad races? Nanzang said he had never forgotten, but this was his choice. People around didn't understand why he made such a decision. He had once been someone who dared to save a friend alone in a pack of mutated beasts. People tried to persuade him, but at this point, the mayor said that joining the army could not be forced, but depended on one's ideals and responsibilities. He said the young man could stay in the rear, and though it was a pity with his achievements, he told him to take the form and leave. At this moment, people continuously berated his decision. In the following days, convoys advanced to the front lines. Nanzang watched them, thinking silently. The news of his refusal to enlist had even made the papers. Criticism continued to be commented upon. Nanzang thought that those who went to battle were all heroes, but this battle was like a moth flying into a flame. Humans had gathered strength, but they still misjudged the enemy. In his previous life, like them, he had enlisted very early, gone to the front lines, and fought in battles. Eventually, he even joined the command team, became a strategic commander, and achieved some accomplishments. As humanity gradually retreated, he devoted his life to researching 5 innate talents and had planted 5 talent seeds in his body. He thought that as long as he could upgrade to the maximum, he could reverse the situation. However, Nanzang never expected that before he could complete this, humanity had been exterminated and he had died at the hands of the supreme being of the myriad races. When he was about to pass away, he felt very angry and unwilling. If only he could have upgraded his innate talents earlier, he could have protected humanity. Perhaps because of this obsession, Nanzang had been reborn, and the talent tree he had planted in his previous life had also returned to the present. The types of abilities that had been seeded were beast taming, elemental, Azure, formation, and spirit abilities. Although upgrading these talents required a lot of time, if he could do it, he would become immensely powerful. Even if all 10 defensive lines collapse, Nanzang thought he could still single-handedly fight against the myriad races and protect humanity. Right now, even if he went to the battlefield, he wouldn't be able to kill those alien races, let alone gather enough elemental stones to upgrade those talents. If he wanted to quickly obtain a large amount of elemental stones, it would be best to go to the testing ground, where there were countless mutated beasts. After passing the trials, he could continuously supply elemental stones for his talent upgrades. Therefore, he decided that he needed to quickly collect elemental stones right now. The rear soldiers said to each other that the trial arena was not often used for training. They used this place to turn mutated beasts into food rations for soldiers at the front lines. A girl on crutches told an older woman to be careful not to get hurt. The woman said these small wounds were nothing. She just feared lacking food supplies for the front lines. They were old and could barely lift swords. Those mutated beasts were so ferocious that they could only be processed little by little. The girl wished she could help too. At this moment, Nanzang arrived, saying he had come here to train and asking if they were short of manpower. He said he could help them deal with these mutated beasts. The girl was happy because they were also very worried and would go get a uniform for him. An older woman wondered why a young man would come here to train. At this point, they suddenly realized he was the one who had refused to go to the front lines. She wondered why he refused the front lines but came here to train. The other person said perhaps it was because he wanted to compensate for the sin of living a cowardly life in the rear. But anyway, they didn't care. They were also short of people to handle the mutated beasts. They wondered how long this guy would persist. At this moment, the girl took out an alloy blade specially used for handling mutated beasts and told him to be careful. Nan Ziying received the blade and went inside. The girl thought that at this rate they could work a bit faster. She felt somewhat moved. The older woman told her not to be foolish. No matter how good he was still someone who refused to go to the front lines. They didn't understand why someone like Nan Ziying had the courage to handle mutated beasts. Going inside, Nan Ziying chose level 3 trials. The system notified him to prepare mentally. The door opened, and a series of mutated beasts rushed towards Nan Ziying. He vowed to become the blade of humanity and decided to start with the talent of beast taming. After the invasion of the myriad races, many animals became mutated due to the intrusion of spiritual energy. In his previous life, Nan Ziying not only had to fight against the myriad races, but also had to deal with mutated beasts. He quickly found the weaknesses of these monsters and used his blade to handle them and extract elemental stones. He thought that the talent upgrade mechanism might be similar to his previous life. Killing a bird would yield 1 elemental stone. At the moment when his talent could increase, his body was also injured, but the current level of wounds was something he could endure. If each attack could ensure avoiding vital areas, perhaps in a short time, Nan Ziying would be able to process all of them. The monsters were extremely vicious, but Nan Ziying could use his blade. He decided to deal with the flying ones first. After processing some mutated beasts, his efficiency score had increased. At this moment, Nan Ziying turned around and saw a large bird. It was the leader of the pack. He thought that, based on his current physical condition, dealing with it would be somewhat difficult. He couldn't confront it head-on. He needed to aim for its vulnerable spots. When Nan Ziying used his blade or needle to attack, he realized that the hardness was even higher than in his previous life. He then decided to try again. When it was lunch break, Xiao Liu asked the 2 women if they weren't going to eat. They said they would stay to see how long he would persist. One of them said he would probably just quietly leave. Now the front lines were also fighting at the 8th defensive line. Their place was at the 5th line, which was not much different from being half on the front lines. It wasn't easy for Nan Ziying to be lazy here. Xiao Liu said level 3 trial arena didn't seem much simpler than the front lines. At this moment, the system announced that his trial had ended. Wang said that guy probably couldn't complete the mission, so he came out midway, which was why the time was so fast. They were about to leave when suddenly, Nan Ziying emerged covered in wounds. His beast kill count was 2,000, breaking the record of the trial tower. Wang didn't understand why he looked like this. Had he passed? Nan Ziying said he had passed, and they could start processing the carcasses. Xiao Liu suddenly realized that the number of mutated beasts was too many. At this point, Nan Ziying left. He took a bath and thought about how to rapidly increase his abilities. The time until the 8th defensive line collapsed, as he remembered, was not long. He absolutely had to race against time, couldn't rest, and decided to go to the next trial level. The logistics staff didn't expect he could pass the trial, but with such serious injuries, he would surely need to rest for a long time. Lai said he was really reckless. Previously, not many people could pass the trial. Wang said with such severe injuries, who knew how long he needed to rest. Maybe after reporting his injuries, he wouldn't come anymore. At this moment, they suddenly saw Nan Ziying. He had returned. Wang asked, wasn't his work finished? Why did he want to come back? Nan Ziying said he would continue to the next trial level and left. She asked, with his wounds being so serious, why was he still going on? Why was he still pretending? Xiao Liu also tried to stop him. The next level was full of large mutated beasts, and he should let his wounds heal better. Nan Ziying said he was used to doing this alone, and it was fine. People didn't understand why someone with such abilities wouldn't go to the front lines but stayed here pretending. Xiao Liu felt very strange. He didn't seem like someone who feared death and hid in the rear at all. The system announced he had activated the next trial level. The monsters here were much larger than before, and the sense of oppression was stronger. At this moment, Nan Ziying was suddenly attacked by a mutated beast from behind. He was thrown down. Nan Ziying got up. His physique had no advantage and couldn't directly confront these mutated beasts. They seemed somewhat excited and provoked Nan Ziying. He wasn't the type to act without preparation. When the mutated beasts rushed towards him, Nan Ziying gathered his strength, leaped up, and used his blade to stab one of them in the head. He had eliminated it. Nan Ziying used his talent, emanating an imposing aura that made the mutated beasts fall one after another. He thought he should be more honest to continue upgrading. He absolutely had to upgrade to the 3rd level. 3 days later, at the rear training ground, the logistics staff were still processing the meat of mutated beasts. Nan Ziang was sitting in a corner. His beast taming level had reached 6. In just 3 days, he had killed more than 10,000 mutated beasts. The efficiency was indeed higher than before. He thought that with level 6 beast taming talent, it seemed he could go to the wilderness tonight. Even a level 5 ability user would not easily escape alone if they went there. Due to the threat of powerful ability users and firearms, mutated beasts rarely actively attack the city, but taming them was an important part of his plan to deal with the myriad races. At this moment, an old man asked if they needed overtime today to transfer more. They could send supplies to the front lines anytime. Nan Ziang said it wasn't necessary. Today he had to leave a bit early. Wang said after just a few days, he couldn't persist anymore. Another person said although he chose to stay behind, the trial tower had far exceeded the work progress because of him. He felt this guy wasn't bad. Xiao Liu watched Nan Ziang leave. She called out to him and said the progress here had been completed and told him to rest. It had been hard on him lately. The work had been done very well. Nan Ziang thanked her and left. At this moment, the city gate opened, and the wounded from the front lines were brought back. He thought, many wounded being brought to the 5th defense line meant the front lines were in danger. At this moment, people looked at the bullets and missiles. They thought they seemed to be gaining the upper hand, but someone realized it wasn't gaining the upper hand. This was a call for reinforcements. Nan Ziang thought to himself, the day the front lines collapsed was not far away. He put on his equipment and thought he had no time to dawdle. A convoy of military vehicles had to stop on their way because one of the vehicles broke down. Someone asked whether to leave the car here and come back tomorrow. There were many mutated wolves nearby, so safety was the priority. At this moment, everyone saw a figure flash by. A girl wondered who would be alone here at this hour. Ahead was the area of mutated wolves, very dangerous. At this moment, the black-haired girl beside her said the director had called to urge them. There were many wounded in the city, and more wounded from the front lines were being sent here. The hospital was waiting for their medicine. The blonde girl said that even with a vehicle, they couldn't see ahead. To pass smoothly, if they ignored the person who just ran by, he would be in danger. Nearby was the den of mutated wolves. If they were attacked, the medical team, medicines, and equipment would have no way to deal with it. The black-haired girl said over the years, they had met many crazy people who didn't know life and death, and they said they couldn't manage it. Then, they still decided to leave. Suddenly at this moment, everyone heard a cry for help. Someone from their team had been attacked by a mutated wolf. The girl said they must leave quickly. Now a wolf was in front of their vehicle. The black-haired girl grabbed a gun and attacked. From a distance, Nan Ziang heard gunshots from the direction of the medical team. Rows of red eyes appeared in the darkness, creating a sense of danger. Not just there, but here too, there was a pack of wolves lurking. But anyway, this helped him save some strength. The increase in spiritual energy concentration made these animals increasingly intelligent. Surrounding Nan Ziang on the side of the medical forces, they were struggling to fight against the wolf pack. The black-haired girl said regardless of how many mutated wolves there were, they would have to take this opportunity to drive away. At this moment, Nan Ziang realized the Wolf King was with him. It seemed that as long as he dealt with this wolf pack, the medical team could be saved. The mutated wolf in front of him looked extremely ferocious. If the boss had appeared, Nan Ziang thought their battle must begin. A beam of light flashed in the space. His beast-taming talent was activated. Blue light emanated an imposing aura, creating blocks of ice. The mutated beasts were attacked, howling angrily and roaring. They escaped the attack from his talent. Nan Ziang decided to eliminate the leader first. At this moment, the wolves seemed to sense something. They became afraid. He thought he should prioritize taming the leader of the wolves first. So to get to it, he placed his hand on it and activated his beast-taming talent. Light emitted, and the surrounding wolves began to bow their heads one after another. His talent was blooming. On the other side, gunshots still rang out continuously. At this moment, Xiao Nan realized their vehicle couldn't start. The black-haired girl panicked. A wolf had now broken the car window. Suddenly, they noticed the wolves were changing. They seemed to become more adorable. They stopped attacking and left the convoy, puzzling the team. The wolves gathered at the Wolf King's location. They seemed to bow before Nan Ziang. The girl realized these huge mutated wolves had been tamed. The black-haired girl was surprised that just one person could tame thousands of wolves. She didn't know what level of beast tamer he was, truly formidable. The system notified that the number of beasts he had tamed had reached today's maximum limit of 1,000. He thought it was somewhat unexpected that the wolves already had the appearance of pets. He let them disperse. He instructed the wolves absolutely not to attack humans. There were many areas around here without people. He had to capture all these mutated beasts. For the sake of humanity's outcome, Nanzang absolutely had to find a way to gather an army of mutated beasts. As for the medical team, the path they traveled must also be protected. At this moment, Nanzang received news from the factory. An emergency meeting was about to take place. At the trial base, the supervisor criticized them for being unable to handle these things, saying it was truly disappointing that they couldn't even deal with a few mutated beasts. Xiao Liu stepped forward, explaining that this city was processing level 4 mutated beasts for the first time. Currently, the rear area only had elderly people. This type of beast required more time to get accustomed to handling. The angry supervisor said the current situation was very tense. The front lines were almost out of food, and the entire rear area didn't have many mutated beasts. If they wanted to ensure supplies for the front lines, they had to start with these stronger mutated beasts. The mayor said they would send people down to help overcome the difficulties. The other person said he didn't think it was necessary, as he had long observed that the Yi City branch hadn't accomplished anything. Did they want to delay military supplies to the front lines so that this entire place would suffer together? At this moment, Xiao Liu said these mutated beasts were approaching level 4, which was already beyond this place's processing capability. The other person said it was precisely their city that had slowed down progress, and the first deserter also came from here. The people here were truly irresponsible, he said with contempt. At this point, Mrs. Wang angrily asked if being an official was so great. Who was he calling irresponsible? Her husband and 3 sons had all died on the front lines to protect the country. Was that irresponsible? They worked all day just to speed up the food supply process. On what basis could he say all their efforts were in vain? Now the old man was somewhat angry. He waved his hand, and a bodyguard stepped forward, using his ability to attack Mrs. Wang. Suddenly he was thrown back. Nanzang was there, telling the supervisor that arguments didn't need to come to blows. At this moment, everyone was happy because he had returned. The mayor didn't understand why Nanzang was here. He was surprised that he could defeat the ability user following the supervisor with just one punch. Had he awakened his ability? The supervisor asked who he was. Was this place trying to rebel? He pulled out his gun. Nanzang recognized this man. In his previous life, he had gotten rich from the war, spent 12 years on the battlefield with the myriad races, and eventually became a fugitive trader hunted worldwide before being executed. Lin Yukol was a blood-sucking leech in the supply line, a despicable person. In his previous life, this bastard had sold various military supplies, and by the time he was discovered, he had already caused considerable damage. He was definitely targeting Yi City's processing speed, wanting to use Yi City to slaughter more high-level mutated beasts to sell materials and get rich. It seemed his appearance here was not unexpected. He thought he had to find a way to deal with him until he exhausted his current resources. Nanzang calmly said that no one here wanted to betray or cause trouble. The people here were not irresponsible. Others angrily asked why he was pointing a gun at them. Hadn't they processed enough for the myriad races battlefield? Their relatives had all gone to the front lines, even perishing there. What did he want from them? The supervisor was a bit confused. He hadn't expected things to turn out this way. At this moment, he suddenly noticed the young man looked familiar and realized he was the deserter. A scholar like him had run away to this place, refused to enlist, and now dared to attack a superior, injuring soldiers. He said he had the right to shoot him right now. Nanzang said he didn't care, despite the ability user having already come before him. He said that previously, he had killed and processed tens of thousands of mutated beasts in the trial tower. After his death, the supply progress would certainly slow down. This surprised both leaders. Nanzang said that currently, no one here could solve these mutated beasts, not even in other areas, which is why the supervisor had come here to try his luck. Nanzang said he really wanted to accept the mission, but since a commander wanted to kill him, he couldn't do anything. The supervisor realized that even though he was a deserter, Nanzang was too familiar with mutated beasts. Judging by the reactions of those present, he didn't seem to be lying. He suddenly smiled and said he hoped what he said was true. They would issue a military order the next day. He would send 5,000 level 4 mutated beasts to the trial arena, and if Nanzang could complete the processing within a week, he would spare him. If he couldn't complete it, they would settle the debt later. The logistics soldiers were very worried. That was a military order. If not completed, it seemed he would die. Xiao Liu asked if he could really do it alone. They could help too. Nanzang assured them not to worry. He would definitely complete it, though it might trouble everyone. Among the level 4 beasts, there was a very strong species with high defense and powerful abilities. They were not just supplies but extremely valuable items. Trash like that supervisor would do anything to make a fortune. But because of this, these monsters were also the best materials for him to upgrade his Azure talent. First, he had to eliminate all the monsters in that man's hands, upgrade his talent, then uproot Lin Yukol and his scum crew. A man announced that 5,000 level 4 mutated beasts had been brought here, and the place was preparing to inspect and receive them. Next, he announced the military order. Members of the logistics station here would take on the mission of processing 5,000 mutated beasts within 1 week. Nan Ziying was a logistics member. According to the order, the supervisor had the right to deal with him. He was suspected of opposition and inciting workers to riot. If delayed, the crimes would be combined. Without reporting, he would be shot immediately. Everyone was extremely panicked because Nan Ziying could be executed. The man asked if he wasn't quick to accept the military order yesterday. Was he now afraid? If it really came to that, he would personally deal with Nan Ziying. He would surely enjoy the process very much. Nan Ziying said he was long-winded, even for just a messenger. The bodyguard behind was somewhat angry, but the man said he would be tolerant with someone about to die. They would look forward to his upcoming performance. People said that this number of high-level beasts was unlike before. Paralyzing smoke would be needed. Another person said the main paralyzing component of the smoke had been transported to the front lines, and the stock in the rear was also not much. It was not yet known if there would be enough, so he should be careful. Someone wondered why Nan Ziying looked so confident. Could it be that he was a mental ability user, so he wasn't afraid of the mental attacks of high-level mutated beasts? At this moment, the man told the bodyguard beside him that he had used mental abilities on Nan Ziying, but he had no reaction at all. The mental power of level 4 mutated beasts was very strong. Even he couldn't confront them directly. They would just wait to deal with Nan Ziying later, but by then, when he came out, he would probably be insane and unable to sense death. What a pity. He said anyway, the higher-ups were too stingy. Why let him deal with a deserter? It was such a waste of time. After he finished dealing with Nan Ziying, those goods would return to his hands. At the same time, inside, where Nan Ziying was, even though these mutated beasts had been paralyzed, their mental power was still very full. Rows of eyes faced him. He felt the situation wasn't too bad. Their killing intent seemed to condense into an entity. At this moment, a dry skeleton advanced to attack Nan Ziying while he was still recovering. Everything around seemed to shatter. Nan Ziying reminded himself it was just an illusion. As long as they couldn't control his mind, to him, they were just like immobile targets. He needed more evil energy to upgrade his Azure talent. Nan Ziying easily defeated one of them. He looked forward to these monsters showing their abilities. Suddenly, he felt a bit surprised. A black energy appeared from under Nan Ziying's feet, wrapping around his legs. A voice echoed, telling him to let go of everything. They attacked Nan Ziying's mind. He seemed to recall his previous life, sadness seeming to invade his being. Nan Ziying suddenly grabbed a section of the black energy with his hand. He told it to shut up. Nan Ziying pulled it away from himself, and the black smoke dissipated in the air. Anyway, his grudge with the myriad races could not be overlooked. Whatever destiny humanity faced, they had to decide for themselves. Just now, his talent continuously absorbed the black energy, and his power seemed to grow. As long as he unlocked the Azure talent and entered the Azure state, he could enhance his body and mental power several times. This evil energy was just the fastest way to upgrade his talent. Nan Ziying extended his hand, and a red color appeared. He used his talent to absorb the mental power of the monsters. Nan Ziying's body seemed to transform. On the other side, the supervisor was still angry because they couldn't procure goods. Lin Yukol told his subordinate to choose words to calm the partner down. He would continue to think of a way. At this moment, the serving girl beside him asked why, in the end times, he was still working so hard. He thought to himself that the deadline was getting closer. It seemed not only China but other places were also not optimistic, so he had to take advantage of the time when he could still make money to accumulate wealth. Otherwise, the mutated beasts he had prepared with such effort would be in vain. But anyway, he still had to be careful with subordinates and those undercover investigators from the front lines or troublemakers. Where could he find a stable place to process high-level mutated beasts? At this moment, Lin Yukol's phone rang, and he answered. The other side said the mission assigned to the Yi City area had been completed. He suddenly remembered Xiao Liu's words. She had said those mutated beasts exceeded normal processing capabilities. He was a bit confused, not understanding how that place could complete such a task. On this side, his subordinate reported that the mission to process the mutated beasts had been confirmed completed, all done by Nan Ziying. At this moment, he suddenly rejoiced, smiled broadly, and asked if that guy was still alive. The other side said he seemed exhausted but had no obstacles. His mind was still clear. Lin Yukol told him to keep an eye on him, apart from killing mutated beasts. If he showed any other strange behavior, the other party should know what to do. On this side, the supervisor's subordinate was unhappy because he had indeed completed the mission. Clearly, when he left last time, he had checked, and the boy had absolutely no mental talent. He didn't know how he had managed it. At this moment, in the content table of the talent tree, his level had increased. Nan Ziang was quite surprised because these days, both his body and mind had improved greatly. Although he hadn't broken through to level 6, he had mastered the skills of the first talent. Thus, in the future, he could subjugate more high-level mutated beasts deep in the wild areas and accelerate the arrangement. Mrs. Wang said he had truly helped them save face. Otherwise, this place would really have been looked down upon by those people. Clearly, they couldn't do it themselves, so they used Yi City. Hearing the sarcasm, the senior had some anger. Nan Ziang suddenly realized that completing the mission had made someone unhappy. The increase in level had also made his sensing ability stronger, so this person was a mental ability user. He thought he had cut off the financial path of those ambitious subordinates. At this moment, the bodyguard walking by seemed to discover something. He told the man not to violate the boss's rules. Even if the mission was completed, no means should be used. Even if there was something shady, he had to wait until the boss had used him before eliminating him. Too much mental power from the demons still remained. If he risked taking action, it would affect himself. At this moment, he told the bodyguard to say less. When the time came, he would report to the boss himself. He seemed not to care about anything else. Black energy spread in the air. This was a technique of mental ability. Nan Ziang recognized it, but unfortunately, he had chosen the wrong person just in time to test the energy of the Azure talent. At this moment, the other person suddenly realized something. He was certain he had infiltrated his mental system, but this place was dark. He should have seen the mental entity, but he couldn't see anything. At this moment, a voice calling him echoed here. He was surprised, wondering if the boy also had a mental unit. He asked what level of ability user he was. Clearly, he had investigated. He panicked, asking who he really was. At this moment, killing intent seemed to envelop that person. Nan Ziang said who he was didn't matter. Didn't he want to probe this place? He smiled. The man realized that this amount of killing intent was unstoppable. He panicked, begging for mercy, but the killing intent had already invaded his body. Nan Ziang said he would let him experience a wonderful feeling. At this moment, the man's body seemed to be torn apart. In reality, he continuously screamed as if going insane. He muttered about how Lin Yukil, his supervisor, was a fool. He could do these things alone. At this moment, people didn't understand what was happening. Was the pressure of leadership so great? Mrs. Wang was also a bit confused. She had only said 2 sentences. Could he not accept it? The bodyguard realized he was affected by the remaining mental power to the point of insanity. Anyway, saying more would ruin the boss's matters. The bodyguard stepped forward and punched the other person's face. Blood flowed. He turned back, apologizing for making everyone laugh. The man had been affected by the power of demon beasts, so he had no choice but to deal with him. At this moment, the bodyguard approached Nan Ziang. He thought to himself that he had fainted. It seemed he was indeed mentally disturbed. That fool had harmed himself and caused trouble for the boy. Anyway, there was no other way. He could only return to report. At this moment, he turned his head and said someone would handle everything. People should try to work. At the same time, Nan Ziang smiled. His current Azure level was 6. When Nan Ziang opened his eyes again, everyone was delighted. He asked how long he had been asleep. Xiao Liu said he had slept for more than 2 days. Mrs. Wang told everyone not to worry anymore. He had regained consciousness. Nan Ziang asked if Lin Yukil had brought more mutated beasts. Mrs. Wang said no, half the people at the transformer station had been transferred elsewhere to work, while the workload had doubled. The 9th Defense Line campaign had ended. Humanity was completely defeated. At the 8th Defensive Line, the battle situation was tragic. On land or in the sky, the military was no match for the myriad races. Her son, a super ability user, had broken his arm and was barely alive. A level 6 ability user, the fire giant, had sacrificed himself for the country. Although Nan Ziang knew they would lose the battle, he didn't expect the defeat to come much earlier than in his previous life. At this moment, Mrs. Wang said that 2 days ago, the supervisor who was killed was affected by demon disturbance to his mind. Their training ground bore no responsibility. There was also a more important matter. Xiao Liu came in, saying that all staff here unanimously elected him as the station chief. Receiving the appointment letter from superiors, Nan Ziang was a bit confused. Mrs. Wang said this was due to everyone's recognition of him. She said they had done improper things before, but hoped he would forgive them. Everyone smiled at him and said they would work hard. Xiao Liu said the leadership's assigned tasks were heavier than before. Half of their station workers were gone, yet the required military supplies had doubled. If everyone didn't eat or drink after a month, how many people would survive their station? Xiao Liu didn't know how to handle this. Nan Ziying thought everyone had no changes, and the only person who could work diligently was himself. Level 6 Beast Taming Talent, Level 6 Azure Talent. If using taming skills and attribute cutting skills, efficiency would double. This way, even with staff working normally, working hours wouldn't be affected. At this moment, Xiao Liu said the work was somewhat unreasonable. She had to report back to leadership. Nan Ziying stopped her and said he had figured out a way. Xiao Liu anxiously turned back. She approached him and said she understood the pressure when he first took office, but his body had just recovered. He couldn't go without rest like this. At this moment, Nan Ziying got out of bed. He said he understood everyone's concern for him, but they should trust him. He could definitely complete the work. Everyone said they would follow all his arrangements. Then they began to speed up progress. At this moment, a figure suddenly flashed by. Nan Ziying recognized that this movement speed certainly wasn't from station staff. He ran in that direction, but by the time he reached the parking lot, the person had disappeared. A gun was pointed at the back of his head, saying he truly had no small courage. He didn't know when she had been standing behind him. She asked when he received Lin Yukel's order how many were in the next batch. Would they deliver or would he pick it up? Nan Ziying said those questions should be asked to Lin Yukel. She said, aren't they in the same group? Moreover, quickly answer the question honestly. At this moment, Nan Ziying thought she was distracted. He summoned his power of Azure talent, pushing her arm away. She stepped back. The gun fired. Nan Ziying asked who said he was Lin Yukel's accomplice. Had she mistaken him for someone else? His hand wasn't scratched. At this moment she asked, then why did you help him? Nan Ziying said he didn't help him. It was just a mission assigned by superiors to Yi City. Whether he was a corrupt worm, scum, or even a traitor, ultimately he was still their district leader. The girl didn't expect him to know about his dirty deeds so clearly. If that was the case, they might as well cooperate to deal with Lin Yukel. She introduced herself as Zhang Yuan from the 2nd Intelligence Group of the 8th Defense Line Support Team and extended her hand. At this moment, Nan Ziying glanced at her and said he refused to cooperate. Zhang Yuan suddenly looked serious and asked if that meant Nan Ziying would choose to help the bad guys. Nan Ziying replied that Lin Yukel would certainly be dealt with, but not now and definitely not with her, because according to him, she basically hadn't thought about the consequences of eliminating Lin Yukel. Zhang Yuan showed she didn't understand what he meant, so Nan Ziying clarified that to eliminate Lin Yukel, there were only 2 possible paths before her: assassination and internal reporting. If choosing assassination, the opponent was not just one person, and no one could guarantee that all participants would keep it secret. Moreover, she needed to remember her identity carefully. Once assassination failed, what would happen? As for internal processing, the investigation time would certainly be prolonged, but at a time when humans had just been defeated on the battlefront, a rumor about internal disputes in the supply department would easily be interpreted as instability in the ranks, which would create serious chain reactions, ultimately making the rear chaotic. Zhang Yuan then just sighed. She didn't know what would be best. Nan Ziying unexpectedly said he would do it. Hearing this, Zhang Yuan objected that he was originally just a deserter. He couldn't even solve the tangle before him, so what could he do? But then Nan Ziying revealed his power, reminding her that hadn't they already fought once? The him of a week ago might not have been certain, but currently, how much chance did she have when facing him? At that moment, a red light appeared on Nan Ziying's hand, making Zhang Yuan realize that his reaction just now was indeed unreasonable, because just a week ago, he had refused to enlist. Zhang Yuan suddenly realized that it was very likely he had been constantly strengthening himself. Nan Ziying then said he had said everything that should be said. She was an intelligent person but acted too emotionally, and that people like Lin Yukel would be dealt with by him personally. Zhang Yuan reluctantly agreed but emphasized that this matter could only succeed. Nan Ziying said this was a deal between them. He would definitely do as promised, but after dealing with Lin Yukel, if he needed mutated beasts, he would have to rely on her. Zhang Yuan didn't understand what else he wanted, asking how many mutated beasts he needed. She added that with his current strength, even on the battlefield, he wouldn't be weak, yet he chose to hide. Would such a person truly not harm humanity? Which side did he stand on? Nan Ziying replied that she was overthinking. Of course, he stood with humanity, but if he wanted to drive out all the myriad races, his current strength was still not enough. Nan Ziying then left, leaving Zhang Yuan confused. Nevertheless, she chose to trust him. A few days later, people in the station discussed how the male station chief had completed the mission very well last time, and now a new mission had been assigned. They hoped everyone would continue to work hard. Xiao Liu looked sad because last time it was just a level 4 mutated beast, but this time it was nearly level 5. Mrs. Wang said the difficulty had increased again. She asked the station chief if he had been injured when handling level 4 mutated beasts last time, so what should they do now? Nan Ziying replied that this mission could still be accepted. At that moment, Lin Yukil stepped forward, saying Nan Ziying was as straightforward as usual. Seeing Nan Ziying sign to accept the mission, he thought to himself that not only was he better than the fat guy before, but importantly, he was a free worker who didn't need commission. The people in the intelligence group had been quite obedient lately, not causing trouble like before. He felt very satisfied. Although the war situation was unfavorable, the demand for ordering necessities had increased. This would be an opportunity for him to make money. Just then, the station chief said if there was anything that needed help, just say it. The next batch of services must be completed well, then he would help and award medals. Everyone then began to take their positions, entering the trial tower. Lin Yukil smiled, saying having someone like Nan Ziying made him very reassured, then left. At this point, Nan Ziying was preparing resources for upgrading his talent. The blade skill was activated. Nan Ziying entered the trial tower and began frantically killing monsters. Outside, news about the continuous collapse of the front lines kept being transmitted back. The myriad races were getting stronger day by day. Humans basically didn't have enough strength to resist them anymore. Inside the trial tower, Nan Ziying was frantically processing demon beasts. His Azure talent continuously increased. While soldiers outside died in battle more and more, Nan Ziying continued to increase his strength. Finally, after Nan Ziying eliminated another evil beast, his power seemed to take physical form. The killing intent had been completely unleashed. Azure was now manifested. He had reached the maximum Azure level. Nan Ziying's Azure power now became pitch black, radiating around him, making the mutated beasts not dare to approach. He seemed to have completely changed and decided to use the mutated beasts before him as test subjects. Nan Ziying swung his blade. Power surged and shattered an entire area. The area in front of him was torn into a line. Blood fell like rain. The sensation of death made him feel quite interesting when he realized this was the maximum power. Compared to other levels, the difference was truly several times greater. At this moment, he dispelled the Azure state. His body returned to normal, and he thought to himself that the elemental stones collected in recent days seemed sufficient for beast taming once more. As for Lin Yukil, though he had money, he wouldn't have a life to keep it. Announcements continued to sound from elsewhere, reporting that currently, the 8th defense line had very few people left. In some countries, there were more places continuing to launch calls for recruits, with the required age lowered to 16. Nan Ziying stepped out and thought to himself that defeat had come too quickly. Although Azure talent was stronger than ordinary people in the end, it was just the power of an individual. He realized he had to quickly rearrange his plans. At that time, Mrs. Wang saw him and was surprised he had completed the mission so quickly. Lin Yukil approached. He smiled and remarked that his efficiency had continued to increase, making him very satisfied, then asked what position he wanted. Nan Ziying replied that he wanted him. Lin Yukil didn't understand, only asking if he was referring to a position. Meanwhile, his cold sweat began to flow down. At this moment, Nan Ziying said he wanted him to go to North Wilderness, infiltrate it at night, and bring back a pack of giant wolves. Lin Yukil was somewhat frightened but still said he was indeed decisive, with an eye for people. He only replied that it would trouble him, while in his heart, he thought if you dare to play tricks, I will definitely kill you. Nan Ziying continued to ponder about the enemy outside invading, with a type of worm like Lin Yukil behind, truly the kind of person whose death wouldn't atone for his crimes. At North Wilderness on a full moon night, Nan Ziying was there. Under the white snow, he recalled his previous life and the awakening of high-level ability users of humanity. The myriad races had also begun to deploy assassination plans, so he had to act more discreetly. At this moment, he called for the surrounding wolves to come closer. Under the moonlight of the snow-covered night, red eyes gradually appeared. He checked his status and knew he was now a level 7 beast tamer. The number of elemental stones to upgrade the beast tamer had also increased significantly. At the same time, Lin Yukil was in a car, sending positions and receiving orders to follow. Reports from ahead indicated a pack of mutated wolves, possibly up to about 1,000. He ordered them to go there and transfer them into nano cages. Once done, they would immediately return. At this moment, he suddenly heard strange noises. The bodyguard panicked, saying it was a beast tide. Wolves were approaching. Lin Yukil didn't understand why this was happening, why there was no warning beforehand. He ordered an immediate move to a safe place. The bodyguard said they could only move within a 1-kilometer range, but this beast tide was certainly larger than that. They could only charge straight ahead and break through the wolf pack, hoping that because the numbers weren't too many, there would still be a way out. At this moment, Lin Yukil ordered them to quickly run. Nan Zhang looked in that direction and thought it was indeed the right time, on a full moon night. He ordered the wolf pack to kill the 2 insects completely, not letting any escape. Nan Zhang began to activate his beast taming talent. Then his talent surged from his body. Streams of red energy spread everywhere, stopping the wolves at this moment. Lin Yukil showed some delight. He didn't expect a beast tamer to appear in this place. A bodyguard remarked that from the beginning, there had never been a beast tamer this powerful in this city. Lin Yukil replied that it might be a hidden master and suggested they should get acquainted first, which might be useful for future matters. Just then, Nan Zhang ordered the 100,000 giant wolves to howl. They began to howl loudly. He ordered them to crush all the cars, not sparing a single one. The giant wolves immediately charged. The bodyguard told Lin Yukil that it seemed the beast tamer had failed, as they were surrounded by the summoned beasts. At that time, he ordered them to use firepower to suppress. However, guns and bullets couldn't deal with those beasts, and the cars were destroyed one after another. The bodyguard at that time continuously tried to protect Lin Yukil while using his power, a level 5 ability, to create black mist and open a nano-displacement cage. At that time, Lin Yukil was somewhat frightened, and the bodyguard told him that the nano-cage had limits. Continuing like this was not the way. Then he used his power to teleport to another place. At the same time, Nan Zhang said he had finally waited for those people, though compared to his prediction, they came much later. He had appeared behind them. When everyone turned around, they discovered the person standing there was Nan Zhang. Lin Yukil realized that the beast tamer from earlier was very likely Nan Zhang, and he suspected that he wanted to kill him. Nan Zhang confirmed that was correct. He warned that if he dared to touch him, he guaranteed not only would he die miserably, but his family would too. Nan Zhang said it was unfortunate that Lin Yukil wouldn't have that chance. He called for his bodyguard, and the bodyguard shouted for Lin Yukil not to be afraid. He would save him. At this moment, Nan Zhang activated his Azure talent. His killing intent condensed into a shield. The bodyguard didn't understand why he couldn't teleport anymore, and he suspected that Nan Zhang might possess a high-level ability, although he thought that was impossible. The bodyguard's hand was then crushed by Nan Zhang. He released his grip, dropping Lin Yukil into the abyss. As he fell, he screamed, unable to understand how an unknown person like Nan Zhang could possess such superior strength. Below, the wolves that had been waiting pounced on him and tore him apart. Nan Zhang stood under the moonlight, saying goodbye. At the Skill Survey Investigation Bureau, a girl sensed a very large ability aura appearing in the Yi City area. She possessed a level 5 aura sensing ability, Su Lang. She thought her sensations from the previous days were indeed not wrong, and it was very likely that someone with a very strong skill had just appeared there. She decided to report to the Bureau immediately. After dealing with everything, Nan Zhang returned to the wolf pack. They seemed happy and continuously circled around him. He thought their performance this time was very good, then patted their heads to encourage them. Afterward, he gave them a new mission in the North Wilderness Desert to help him hunt for elemental stones. That night, under the moonlight, the howling of wolves echoed. At Yi City, Zhang Yuan told Nan Zhang that Lin Yukil had died yesterday. His team encountered monsters in the North Wilderness Desert, and the entire unit was eliminated. She asked if that was caused by Nan Zhang. He admitted it. Zhang Yuan further asked if he had the ability to control monsters. Nan Zhang replied that it was a secret that could not be revealed. Zhang Yuan was somewhat startled, then suddenly sighed and said that this morning she had submitted all the criminal evidence against Lin Yukil. She believed his assets would be quickly confiscated. Anyway, this time everything was thanks to Nan Zhang, so she said she would invite him for a drink tonight, if possible. Nan Zhang refused, saying he wasn't interested. However, if she really wanted to thank him, she could use another way. Zhang Yuan asked what way that was. Nan Zhang said he wanted to turn this place into the largest slaughterhouse in Yi City to accept a large number of mutated creatures, surpassing other slaughterhouses. Zhang Yuan said the front lines were lacking supplies, and if they could meet that demand, the superiors would certainly be pleased. She also promised to arrange this. The next day at the workshop in the slaughterhouse, with the Azure talent, Nan Zhang easily processed the mutated beasts and quickly obtained elemental stones without wasting energy. At the same time, the capture of giant wolves was also carried out. 2 days later, Nan Zhang had upgraded to a level 7 beast tamer. His beast taming ability had also reached a very high level. At the North Wilderness Desert, he activated his beast taming power. He summoned creatures from everywhere to hold the North Wilderness and protect the land of Blue Star. The wolf pack howled. Before Nan Zhang's eyes now appeared a herd of level 6 Tibetan yaks. He used his taming talent to make them completely obey his orders. He assigned them the task of holding this place and continuing to hunt for elemental stones. Meanwhile, he carefully instructed that they absolutely must not harm people, must not attack the city, and if called, must appear immediately. In the face of such thousands of giant beasts, Nanzang had advanced to a level 8 beast tamer. At Leap Shuan Gorge, he continued to use the remaining elemental stones to tame a group of mutated apes. After all, living up to the name of level 7 beasts, their aura compared to previous ones was vastly different. The mutated apes looked extremely strange, extremely fast speed, and their imposing manner was also very strong. The power stream of the ape herd and Nanzang merged. After using the taming talent, Nanzang suddenly felt lucky that everything was still within the level that his talent could control. Just then, from above, a series of apes rushed towards Nanzang. He was startled by the strange sound that had just echoed. At the same time, from behind him appeared an ape with black smoke surrounding it. Nanzang immediately realized that the recent taming process had failed. At this moment, Nanzang activated the power of his Azure talent and thought that if he couldn't tame them immediately, then the only way was to fight first and then subdue. He began to use the Berserk skill of the Azure talent while activating his level 8 beast taming skill. The power from the skill created such violent tremors that the rocks and soil resonated, causing the apes to quickly disperse and escape from that place. Nanzang observed the apes everywhere and suddenly realized that the reason for this failed taming seemed to come from their very nature. He thought it would be a pity to kill them all, so first he needed to deal with the leader. Just then, Nanzang dashed through the ape herd and confronted one of them. In his heart, he silently judged that this one's combat value wasn't bad, but it was a pity it wasn't intelligent enough. Nanzang used vines to make two apes collide with each other. One of them became angry, continuing to struggle and tug at the rope. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Nanzang jumped down, attacking the apes below. He looked deep into the night and silently called for the real leader to appear. From inside the stone cave, a large figure gradually emerged. Nanzang immediately felt enormous pressure from this creature. He thought that if not for the power of Azure, he would have already kneeled long ago. This ape king was at least level 9, possibly higher. It used its hand to attack towards Nanzang with extreme speed, sharp teeth looking as if they wanted to tear him apart. In his heart, Nanzang thought things wouldn't be that simple. He immediately used his blade, activated the Azure skill, and counterattacked. The giant ape used its hand to push him off the cliff, while simultaneously releasing purple power that spread throughout the area. Nanzang seemed to be injured. He felt that if he didn't teach these beasts a lesson, they would think he was easy to bully. With that thought, he utilized his Azure talent and performed the Hell on Earth skill, causing killing intent to spread increasingly stronger. At the investigation bureau, Su Leng said the strong killing intent she had sensed earlier certainly couldn't be wrong, and superiors had required them to keep an eye on Yi City in the coming days. Therefore, she believed she had to try a bit harder. However, clearly, they were the same age, yet the other person kept calling her older sister, which Su Leng found puzzling. Just then, Su Leng suddenly saw something. She asked everyone to prepare quickly because something was happening. Chen Qier understood the issue and immediately applied her probing ability. Her eyes displayed 2 Taiji circles. Before her was a scene like a true Azure hell. Meanwhile, Nanzang was fighting with the Ape King. He had almost transformed into a real monster. Chen Qier was startled in fear and fell down. Su Leng approached and asked her what she had seen. Chen Qier couldn't control herself and burst into tears. Before her eyes was still that terrifying scene, the image of a person who was undoubtedly the embodiment of the Azure demon. Under the red glow of the Azure talent, Nanzang asked the Ape King if it had submitted yet. If not, they would continue fighting, but he wasn't sure he would be lenient with it anymore. The Ape King spat out a stream of red blood. Its spirit still seemed very strong. Nanzang felt it would be a pity if it died like this because its value was too great, so he thought it would be better to let it become a comrade, ruling the myriad races together. The ape suddenly raised its head, extending its hand towards him. Nanzang also extended his hand to touch it, then dispelled the skill and began to give orders. From now on, the entire ape herd would be led by the Ape King, occupying the Leap Shuan Valley to collect elemental stones, not harming humans, not attacking cities, and always ready for battle when called. Thanks to this, Nanzang's taming talent continued to increase. Meanwhile, at the Survey Investigation Bureau, Su Leng told Chen Qier that behind last night, she could still sense a great source of power. Su Leng also emphasized that she wasn't speculating but only thought she could recognize 2 unusual energy sources, one of which was from a person. Chen Qier affirmed that was impossible, as to probe such an ability, they had spent a lot of time. People with high-ranking abilities were always mysterious and never made public, but this new Azure could rank 10th, something that showed this was an extremely terrifying individual. Sulang admitted that perhaps she had overthought. Right after, a new list was published. The Skill Center published incomplete categories and items, but the 10th position was a person in black with the Azure rank. Information about the mysterious man in black appearing at Leap Shoyan Gorge, who had created damage power ranking 10th on the Eastern Alliance's power ranking, was immediately spread. At the slaughterhouse, Xiao Liu reminded Nan Zhang to wipe his face before appearing in front of others. He also said that Nan Zhang's phone was ringing. Just then, an announcement sounded that the 8th defense line had been defeated. The 5th defense line had fully activated the policy of calling for veterans. The situation showed that defeat was coming very quickly. Even the call for veterans was implemented earlier than normal. Nan Zhang opened his phone and saw a message from his father, who wanted him to come home. At home, Nan Zhang's father told reporters that his relative had returned, so he hoped everyone would wait a moment. A female reporter spoke up, saying she just wanted to ask him about veterans. He agreed, took off his coat, and began the interview. The reporter asked how he had reacted after receiving the mobilization order. He replied it was an unavoidable responsibility. When asked about his son, Nan Zhang, refusing to enlist, he was silent for a long time. Just then, his family had returned. He turned back to tell the reporter that this was his family. His wife, Mrs. Qin Ixuami, was a volunteer in the factory. His daughter, Nan Zishan, was a doctor. Although his son didn't go to the battlefield, he was still fighting in the slaughterhouse to provide necessities for the front lines. He said in his heart, his son was still a good child. As long as he didn't violate morals, he would always support him. Nan Zhang sighed, feeling his father was so foolish. When the reporter continued to ask him about the fall of the 8th defense line, his father became angry, demanding they stop the interview and not pressure his son anymore. He emphasized that initially he was only assigned to the 6th line, but had actively requested to go to the 7th line, so wasn't that qualification enough? He said that although his son didn't go to battle, killing and processing mutated beasts was also very dangerous. Being a major supplier of materials for Yi City, wasn't that a contribution too? He asked the reporter what, after all, was the meaning of media when they continuously criticized others. Nan Zishan also spoke up, saying if they needed more people, she had already applied to be a volunteer healer at the 7th defense line. At this moment, the whole family stood up to protect each other. The reporter then fell silent and left. Nan Zhang was angry and said he would go with everyone. At that time, Nan Zhang stood up, leaving the house, saying he had work to handle, so he would leave immediately. Mrs. Qin Ixuami wondered why he couldn't eat with everyone, but Nan Zhang's father spoke up, saying to let him go, as it was his own responsibility. Anyway, they had met each other. That was enough. Nan Zhang then thought that tonight he still had some time to tame another herd of war elephants. When he reached the middle of the forest, he told them not to hide anymore but to come out. Just then, a huge elephant appeared, breaking through the trees in front and using its trunk to grab a tree trunk to attack him. Nan Zhang counterattacked, knocking the tree away from the elephant. He angrily thought that today he needed to save time, so he couldn't waste time with them. Right after, he used his taming power to suppress the elephant, ordering it to pass a message to its companions. If anyone didn't submit, they could come, he wouldn't spare them, and would kill them. Immediately, a series of war elephants appeared and began communicating with each other. Nan Zhang continued to use his power to order the entire elephant herd to hold the area of the primordial forest sea, collect elemental stones, and always be ready to fight at any time. At that time, Nan Zhang's beast taming level had been raised very high, with countless types of mutated beasts tamed. He thought that the formation talent had finally lit up, and he had to quickly proceed with classification. He decided to return to the slaughterhouse to get more elemental stones. At Yi City, after processing some mutated beasts, his usable elemental stones had reached 100,000 points, a number sufficient for upgrading. Nan Zhang decided to test the sword array first. At that time, he recited the spell, and a series of sword bodies appeared, floating in the air to arrange into a sword array. When the spell was activated, the power from the swords poured down on the mutated beasts below. However, Nan Zhang thought that a level 1 sword array still had too weak killing power. Therefore, he decided to stack 2,000 sword arrays at once. Sure enough, the killing power increased significantly. He thought that if he arranged this array in all the workshops, then killing would be much less laborious in the future. At workshop number 2, Nan Zhang continued to use the sword array combined with the Azure skill to eliminate mutated beasts. After just 1 hour, he had successfully upgraded his formation talent. At night, he sat alone on top of a building, looking up at the bright night sky, thinking it was time to say goodbye to everyone and head to the front lines. The next morning, Xiao Liu returned to the slaughterhouse and greeted Nan Ziying good morning. She said the door was already open. Perhaps Director Nam had continued killing throughout the night. Mrs. Wang said that maybe Nan Ziying was angry about last night's news, in which reporters had written about his father with many successive criticisms.